The simulation ended with a string of system prompts and 3 prize options blinking on the display. This simulation ends in TT. This simulation has a retainable option. 1. Axe of Khorne, Chaos, a powerful demonic weapon, once a finely crafted power axe but now horrifically altered and capable of growth. Note, an unknown daemon of Khorne is condensed within, though it appears to be only an illusory prototype. Note, heh. Khorne's laughter echoed through the brass throne. Her interest has grown, not waned. Note, the bloodthirsty daemon Cabanha has been reborn from blood. Its rage toward you will only increase. It will end in combat next time. 2. Iron Hand Stormbolter. Note, a masterwork Stormbolter forged of Khorne metal and purified by the Emperor's fire, finished with a Primarch's peak skill. Note, apparently a parting gift from an old friend you once called brother. Note, hiss, hiss. A headless phantom opens its palms to you and shakes them silently. 3. Emperor's Original Blood. Note, a vial of the Emperor's primordial blood. Note, the last thing the grievously wounded Emperor ordered Adeptus Marshal Constantin Dorval to do before he took the Golden Throne. Note, weak, she still saw scenes through unparalleled psychic vision, visions that gave her hope. Note, the Emperor's Original Blood will grant you a constitution you've never had. Extreme resistance to chaos corruption. You've proven your loyalty, but she wanted an extra safeguard. As you grow, the 4 gods' covetous corruption will become far more intense. Note, the blood may have other unknown effects, adaptation and exploration required. There was also a cooling time readout and a warning about subspace storms. When the subspace storm breaks out, it is forbidden to come. Luoxia watched Rorschach, the cyan wolf boy, blink open his eyes and inhale sharply. He scanned the options slowly, fangs flashing as if on reflex. For a long moment, he didn't pick a prize at all. Instead, he toggled the simulation's secondary prompt and re-requested the arrival of the space wolves. The system flashed its refusal. The reminder about subspace storms repeated itself. Rorschach narrowed his eyes and looked at the wolf boy next to him. He shook his head in mute frustration and muttered under his breath, "I thought I found a bug. If there's no cooldown for entering subspace, couldn't I just come down over and over and claim everything?" The simulator wasn't that charitable. He pushed the thought aside and examined the 3 prizes again. The Axe of Khorne was immediately out. Unless he wanted to become a Chaos Pawn, he wouldn't touch it. The Master-level Stormbolter made his pulse quicken. If not for the 3rd option, he would have taken it in a heartbeat. Resistance to corruption. The thought lingered. Rorschach glanced over at the hospital bed. Bucky, the Winter Soldier, lay there, still unconscious. He stood from the metal chair and walked to the small bathroom in the med bay. The last time he'd taken physical enhancements, it had been a profoundly private, intensely personal experience. Better not to have witnesses. He stepped in, closed the heavy metal door, and flipped the lock. Without hesitation, he selected the 3rd option, the Emperor's Original Blood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then bile and crimson erupted from the 7 orifices in his face, blood pouring from mouth, nose, and eyes as if his skull were a broken fountain. He staggered under the shock, tore off his clothes, and turned the shower full blast. Red flooded his skin, pouring from pores as if his body were bleeding from every pore. He felt no pain, only a spreading numbness and a prickly itch along his spine, a crawling sensation that grew with each heartbeat. His breathing grew shallow and ragged. Dizziness closed in. He sat heavily on the cold metal floor and let the scalding water wash the blood away. Blackness edged his vision. 2 hearts, heart and heart of Lemon Russ, seemed to be running on their last beats. He felt like he was slipping under. Just as everything dimmed, the numbness turned to heat and an alien scent filled his sinuses. It wasn't illness, it was vitality, strange, scorching life pouring through him. The feeling flowed into the heart of Lemon Russ and into the other heart, and Rorschach snapped awake with a gasp. Every inch of him felt saturated, re-soaked with the Emperor's blood. Energy thrummed in his bones. He felt larger. Where he had stood at 1.9 meters before, he now measured 2 meters tall. His gray hair, which had been cropped close, sprang to life and shot down his back, lengthening at a terrifying rate until it hung below his waist. His eyes, the wolf boy's blue, shone with an unusual brightness, sharper than before. The changes were real, but not the cataclysmic transformation he had half feared. He ran his hands over himself, adjusting to the new height and bulk, and frowned. He wanted to know what exactly the Emperor's blood had done. He raised a finger, found a patch of skin on his forearm, and sliced it hard. A ribbon of viscous fluid welled up, 3 parts ordinary red blood to 7 parts shimmering gold. The golden part seemed semi-sentient. It wriggled like living light before it began to pull back, slowly retracting into the wound, as if the blood itself preferred to remain within him. The shower's scalding water ran over the wound, but could not wash the gold away. Rorschach stared at the glowing seam of flesh, heart pounding. He bared his fangs on an involuntary snarl. "Is this human blood?" he whispered. Or, he thought, eyes narrowing, is this the essence of the Emperor himself? 143. Winter Soldier is dead. Alpha is here. Name, I have no idea. Age, I really don't know. James Buchanan Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, lay curled on the multi-purpose hospital bed, fingers pressed to his temples. Pain and confusion warped his wide, unfocused gaze. A few meters away, Rorschach sat in a metal chair. His gray hair had been cropped short again. His 2-meter-tall frame cast a long shadow beneath the bright surgical lights. He held a steaming cup of Tygus milk and sipped at it in slow, deliberate gulps. Behind him, the servo-skull Roditus hovered on its anti-grav engines. Red light blinked from its empty eye sockets. Mechanical pincers flexed and retracted as if eager to speak. It kept its silence out of deference to its master. Rorschach spoke to the man on the bed in a flat, clinical voice. "Your full name is James Buchanan Barnes. You are commonly called Bucky Barnes. You fought in World War II, fought against the Japanese and the Nazis. You were captured by Hydra during an operation, subjected to experiments, altered, and brainwashed." He recited the Winter Soldier's history plainly. For decades they called you the Winter Soldier. They made you their assassin, a weapon to destabilize nations. You were forced to kill many innocents, old people, children, men and women. "Say no more," Bucky whispered, clutching his head. He suddenly lifted his face, eyes crimson with strain, and roared. Rorschach did not flinch. He set his cup down and watched him without expression. "How dare you disrespect the Primarch? Damn heretic!" The servo-skull, Roditus, clicked indignantly. Its inner skull shell split, and a tiny laser cannon, thicker than a pistol but minuscule compared to its normal armaments, extended and swung toward Bucky's temple. "Master Primarch, stop wasting time with words. Leave him to me. 1 shot and he's gone. If you want a loyal, powerful fighting servant, I can make one for you within 3 days." Roditus's voice whirred with mechanical zeal. Rorschach's only response was a cold glare. "If all I wanted were thugs, I could have gotten you to convert some back-alley criminals into fighters. Get out of here, Roditus. You're so loyal you stole Jessica Ray without asking, and remember to give David those production drawings for the laser weapon." I understand, noble Primarch." Roditus folded its cannon back inside and drifted to one side. Rorschach turned his focus back to the trembling man on the bed. "Bucky, you owe lives to those you've taken. You owe a debt to humanity. I left you alive for 2 reasons. To learn what you can tell us of Hydra's structure, and because I believe you still have the right to be saved. At the very least, you retain the right to die like a hero." Bucky's lips moved. My memory is too messy. I remember the killings. I remember all of them." His breath hitched. He fixed Rorschach with those red-rimmed eyes, and, in a voice barely above a whisper, made a request that was almost a plea. "I need time to sort it all out and to break the mental conditioning. If I lose control again, please, kill me. I don't want to become a puppet assassin who only knows how to kill." Rorschach regarded him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, very slowly. "I can promise that. And those Hydras, they won't be allowed to leave this planet either. But don't make me wait too long." He rose, setting the empty cup down with deliberate calm, and walked toward the medical room door without looking back. "Welcome back to the real world, Bucky Barnes." The servo-skull flitted after him, its anti-grav buzzing. Before it crossed the threshold, it extended a mechanical pincer in an awkward buff, almost comical sign of sympathy toward the man still rocking on the bed. "Old boy, please don't fall into my hands. GJJ. Ah, sorry, Lord Primarch, I was wrong." Roditus snapped, retreating. Outside the medical room, Rorschach rubbed his jaw, tasting the faint tang of his own impatience. He waited until Roditus had flown clear of the overhead gate, then glanced up at the hovering skull and asked, tone flat, "Where are the blueprints for the Terminator knockoff? What should have taken 1 day was dragged into 3. You delayed me." "Master Primarch, would you prefer I tell you the truth or a lie?" Roditus responded in its composed, mechanical cadence. "Truth," Rorschach said. Roditus's tone shifted into the practiced calm of a tech priest. "Your base, my lord, is effectively empty. There is no foundry, no grind lines, no stockpiled materials. Not even the basics. Ceramic steel, reinforced plastics are available at scale. Adamantium is out of the question." Rorschach's eyes narrowed. "If I had everything, would I even need a tech priest?" "You would not," Roditus agreed. "But you're not equipped. To build a Terminator pattern chassis properly, you need large, ultra-high temperature forges and an industrial supply chain. We could, however, adapt. We can use remnants of alien metal for the skeleton. The outer plating could be an on-world gold titanium alloy, lighter and easier to produce." Roditus drifted closer and lowered its voice, the servos whispering. "But is that enough for you, my lord?" "So?" Rorschach asked. "Expansion," Roditus said bluntly. "Give me permission to build out. Let me requisition factories, tap foundries, commandeer production. In short order, I can field an intelligence-controlled army. We could take a world for you. The moon, other planets, they would become forging worlds beneath your hand." Rorschach's hand moved before Roditus could finish. He produced a plasma pistol and pressed it against the white dome of the servo skull. The energy hum was a low, lethal promise. "I find you've been a bit too ambitious lately," Rorschach said softly. "Do you need a plasma wash to calm your processors?" "Lord Primarch," Roditus stammered, a buzz of offended circuitry, "can a skull indulge a fantasy once in a while?" 144. Logistics and Maintenance Core. Automatic servo robot technical priest Roditus had a point. After Rorschach's threat to the other side, he immediately informed Iron David, and the three of them convened for another impromptu roundtable. Rorschach said little. He mostly ate whatever had been set in front of him, while Roditus and Iron David traded barbs until they nearly came to blows. The servo skull flashed an ultra-small laser cannon in exasperation. Iron David, snorting, reached out and pinched the bony chin of the floating skull. Rorschach himself had to go down and break up the quarrel. They hammered out a plan. Iron David would use his law firm to acquire several local material manufacturers on the brink of bankruptcy. Roditus would supply the basic formulas for plastic steel composites and ceramic steel. Routine steps could be outsourced with enough money. Anything complex or classified would be shipped into the base for final assembly. Iron David also agreed to restart a construction program and help Roditus build an underground foundry, convenient for producing copycat Terminator suits or repairing heavy vehicles. Satisfied, both men called a truce. The skirmish was over, for now. The base slowly stirred back to life. Connors kept his head down in the lab, obsessed with Compound Number 5. Even Rorschach and Jessica found themselves pressed into contractor work, hauling ordered materials for Iron David. Throughout it all, Iron David, ever tuned to the world outside, fed updates to Rorschach. Perhaps because of Rorschach's earlier warning, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra had launched tit-for-tat reprisals, a proxy city war fought in the name of competing international mercenaries. South America and Europe were the worst hit. In parts of Eastern Europe, Hydra units posing as mercenaries and S.H.I.E.L.D. forces doing the same treated civilians with contempt, trading gunfire on the streets and leaving countless dead. Tony Stark had shown up in a few of those battles and rescued civilians, but he could not stem the wider collapse of order. Worse, official pressure had turned on him. Legislators influenced by Hydra and those backing S.H.I.E.L.D. combined to subject Iron Man to a censure inquiry, accusing him of unauthorized interventions in foreign affairs. It was a nasty, tangled mess. Rorschach listened to Iron David's briefing, his cyan wolf eyes narrowing. After a moment, he said with a cold smile that he expected, any information Iron David had on Hydra bases or personnel should be sent to S.H.I.E.L.D., and S.H.I.E.L.D. should be handled the same way in return. Unless Iron David stumbled upon Hydra's leader or a truly pivotal base, Rorschach wouldn't personally intervene. Iron David nodded and quietly poured more fuel onto the flames online, letting the two sides tear into each other. That should have been enough, but Roditus kept nagging for more hands. Finally, Rorschach, worn down by the floating skull's insistent chatter, called another meeting. Roditus presented his proposal carefully. Fabricate a batch of automatic servo robots from local materials, specifically for logistics support. They would free the team from menial labor. Let Rorschach, the distinguished Primarch, watch the situation unfold in peace. Let Jessica continue her training uninterrupted and spare the contractors the worst of the work. The suggestion hung in the air. For a moment, the metal round table seemed to hold its breath. Jessica was the first to raise a hand. She agreed. Iron David's eyes glinted with blue light, and his metal chin bobbed in approval. As the list of tasks and ambitions grew, the need for reliable, non-human labor became clear. Untested civilians could not be brought into the base, but creations of the Mechanicus could be trusted. Rorschach, impassive, finally bared his teeth in a small, rare smile and gave the plan his assent, under strict conditions. The automatic servo robots would have no artificial general intelligence and would carry no weapons. If Roditus breached any of those conditions, all of his future proposals would be summarily rejected. A few days later, Roditus presented the first prototype. It stood about 1.5 meters tall, its body a low, armored shell like a tortoise's carapace, with several mechanical limbs and a cluster of tentacled manipulators dangling beneath. Rorschach studied the machine with a scrutinizing gaze. Something about its silhouette rang a bell. Leditus, he said slowly, nodding toward the servo skull floating beside him. Parts of that design remind me of the Necron underworld scarab. Red light pulsed in Roditus's lenses. The servo skull bobbed up and down, almost gleeful. As expected of the noble Primarch, you saw through my design at once. I, an unrepentant servant of the Omnissiah, have no shame in borrowing lessons from ancient machines. The Necron skeletons, yes, even I admit, their tech is remarkable. Roditus made it clear that the resemblance was cosmetic. The internal systems and operational logic were pure Mechanicus, repair, transport, and one extra function. Given sufficient metal, the unit could replicate its own structure and fashion another servo robot. Rorschach's eyes narrowed at that, but Roditus was ready. To prevent any runaway replication, he said hastily, even if there are limitless materials, the batch size will be capped at 13. Lord Primarch, I am loyal to the Emperor and to you. A hint of amusement creased Rorschach's face. He withdrew the plasma pistol he'd had holstered and let the tension break. A jest, then, he said, smiling. Very well, Roditus. I'll allow up to 50 copies for now, to speed up the construction of the high-temperature furnaces. A chuckle rippled around the room. Iron David's eyes flashed. He couldn't hide his enthusiasm. I can't wait to see the copycat Terminator power armor, he said, half serious, already imagining the possibilities. So the Logistics and Maintenance Corps took its first steps. Simple, armored servitors, built from local materials, designed to carry and mend, not to think or kill. The rules were clear, the limits defined. Now, with robots to bear the burden, the team could focus on the larger war brewing outside and the work that could be done in the quiet, subterranean foundry. 145. Ring the bell 3 times. Praise the God of all things. In the deepest reaches of the underground base, a dark cavern far larger than the main hall had been excavated by Iron David. Taciturn automatic servo robots hauled away mountains of earth and rock that should have been impossible for their frames to bear, moving slowly and relentlessly toward the surface. This is much more convenient than before, Iron David muttered, his metal shoulders hunched slightly as he shook his head. He kept the machines in motion with terse commands, while a blue light pulsed in the optics of his face. The alien that needs to be cleaned up, come and help! A communication ping from the servo skull Roditus flashed across David's superprocessor. For a long moment, he remained motionless, hands folded behind his back, watching the little robots crawl like ants. He hummed a bar of classical music with his mouth slightly open. Dear Iron David, could you please raise your hand and come to assist the humble tech priest Roditus? A few minutes later, the skull sent an impatient follow-up. Ha! At last, David shrugged, shook his metal head, and stepped out of the raw cave. He left the tireless machines behind and moved through a widening metal-lined corridor that could accommodate heavy vehicles. The corridor opened into a temporary foundry that was in full operation. The air itself felt like a furnace. Body temperature readings spiked toward 100 degrees Celsius. Machines roared in a thunderous, steady rhythm. At the center of the foundry stood a forging furnace 50 meters tall, belching intolerable heat. 2-meter diameter pipes fed its crown and vanished into the metal walls, more conduits disappearing into hidden channels. Sparks and the glare of molten metal lit the room. Reditus, you went and started the foundry without authorization. Aren't you worried about a safety accident? The foundry isn't finished, David said, stepping into the blistering air, blue light flaring in his eyes as he watched the servo robots feed fuel into the forge. What safety accident? Now that the forge exists, why not use it? When will the copycat Terminator the Primarch dreams of be built, if we wait forever? You, uneducated alien, know nothing. Reditus barked back, a harsh mechanical rasp. The servo skull's clamps darted out and wrapped a slow-moving robot that had lagged behind. Under the skull's crude, metaphysical maintenance, the machine resumed normal function. David's head tilted, a gesture almost like pity, and he couldn't help but shake his metal shoulders. I don't have the patience to argue. Reditus, why did you summon me? You didn't call me out here just to yell at me. Aha! Wrong guess, Reditus replied, finally driving his anti-grav unit to hover beside David. The little skull's voice dropped into a rare, serious register. I need you to help build the internal frame of a suit of power armor. The remains of that metal alien, the Destroyer, have been thrown into the forge and are melting. At the word power armor, David's expression, if a construct like him could have one, stayed impassive but intent. He followed Reditus through the heat toward the open maw of the furnace. Waves of scorching air rolled from the doorway, shimmering and lethal. The interior shimmered with boiling, iridescent metal. Although I have no proper sensory grace, Reditus murmured as he bobbed in the air and waved his clamps, I still feel that old familiar warmth. The skull's red optics flashed as it slipped into the old rites of the Mechanicus, clamps extending and retracting in a steady, ritual rhythm. David's blue eyes fixed on the melting destroyer in the furnace. According to the data my lord has shared, David said, this alien alloy is a hybrid of technology and sorcery, an alien civilization's work. Have you solved its structure, Reditus? Alas, David, that is difficult, Reditus confessed. Unless I can interface with the systematic, layered knowledge of that civilization, I can only approximate its properties, apply techno-arcane alterations according to my understanding. For all their scraps of Terra's lore do little more than fill a tiny gap in my corpus, the skull continued, voice swelling with pride and contempt. It is but a sliver of what the old masters of the Mechanicus dreamed of, nowhere near the Golden Age. Humanity here has not even truly left the cradle of the planet. It is shameful, an affront to the Omnissiah. They are weak and need guidance from the Primarch and the glory of the human empire, Reditus declared, sincere zeal flaring in its red lenses. Come, David, let us offer the Primarch a gift worthy of his name. The skull's clamps clacked like gongs. Mechanically assembled auxiliaries Reditus had bolted together word to life. For a moment, their clicks and hisses outshone the forge's roar. Ring the bell once, Reditus commanded. Push the lever, start the pistons, pump. Obedient servo robots responded, accelerating the feed of fuel. Ring the bell twice, press the button, ignite the engines, spool the turbines, breath life into the cores. The binaural clangs of improvised actuators and ancient liturgy blended as the apparatus heaved and screamed into function. Molten metal, luminous with unnatural colors, swirled and boiled in the furnace. The destroyer's alloy liquefied into a river of shimmering juice that spat and eddied at the furnace's throat. David walked forward without hesitation, heedless of the temperature that would blister ordinary materials. He reached both metal palms through the open furnace door, feeling the viscous incandescent alloy flow and sear around his actuators. Ring the bell 3 times, Reditus intoned, flying a tight circuit around the Iron Man as instruments whirred and the foundry howled. Sing in unison, praise the God of all things, the skull chanted, its voice amplified by the clangor of machines. 146. Fight for the future. The base's hall was brightly lit. Rorschach sat at the round metal table, his blue, lupine eyes narrowing almost without him noticing. He listened for a while, then reached out and felt the faint, intermittent vibrations running through the building. He let out a soft sigh. I knew Roditis wouldn't be patient. Fine, let it finish the job as quickly as it can, so we can have some peace, he muttered, bending his head to read the crumbling Imperial document before him. It was a fragment, only a few lines about the combat nuns, sparse notes on ranks and types, a few brief entries on levels he didn't entirely recognize. He blinked, trying to parse the broken language. Jessica, you were pacing around my site an hour ago. If I hadn't found you, how long were you planning to wander? He asked aloud, then frowned and looked up. Jessica, who'd been hovering nearby, forced a smile and hurried forward a few quick steps. Her body was lithe, muscles visible under tight training gear, and she took her seat opposite him in one practiced movement. Rorschach snapped the brittle paper shut and fixed her with a steady stare. Tell me, what are you planning to do? Jessica's face flickered through several emotions before she seemed to steady herself. She took a deep breath. I want to go out for a while. When have I ever restricted your freedom? Rorschach asked. You finish your training, you can go anywhere. Do you think you have to report to me? She wrung her hands. Rorschach's expression softened a fraction, but his eyes were still puzzled. Don't tell me you're short on money. Didn't David the Iron Man just wipe your credit card bill? Oh, boss, I'm not a reckless spender. Actually, I'll just tell you. Jessica blinked hard and found her courage. My childhood friend's in trouble. She might need my help. I want to go see what happened, and if possible, recruit her to our team. I can vouch for her character, everything. I'd stake my life on it. Rorschach studied her for a long beat, then gave a small, surprised sound. Thought it was serious. Fine, take your leave. As for your friend, I'll have David run a background check. If everything's clean, she can join. He smiled, and it transformed his face in a way that was almost gentle. We're getting busier. The team could use more hands. Relief made Jessica leap up from the chair. She flashed a bright grin and nodded fervently. I'll try to make it short. Won't hold up your plans. Rorschach shook his head and chuckled. You're not needed for the routine stuff. Don't force yourself to rush. Wait, Jessica, he called as she turned to go. He pulled a plasma pistol from the belt at his hip and tossed it to her. She caught it, bewildered. Roditis stole your laser pistol, Rorschach said quietly. I've ordered him to set up a weapons production line to make good on that. Until then, borrow this for self-defense. He added firmly, whatever you run into, trust your training. If you face something you can't handle, save yourself first and send a distress signal. I'll come in person. Thank you, boss. Jessica beamed, cradling the pistol as if it were a talisman. She waved it playfully and explained. My friend was a child star. At worst, she's run into some sleazy gangsters or rich men trying to take advantage, things I can handle one-on-one. Don't worry, I won't get into anything I can't handle. With that, she darted off toward the underground passage that linked the base to the outside. Rorschach watched her retreating figure until it disappeared into the corridor, his blue eyes narrowing in thought. He muttered to himself, turning the torn page over in his mind. Combat nun ranks, apprentice, endurance, rotation, reserve. Sometimes I think Jessica will be an apprentice forever. The subtle vibration persisted for 3 days. With Jessica on leave and David tied up helping Roditis, Rorschach picked up the task of delivering meals and supplies to Winter Soldier Bucky and Professor Connors. Connors' research had reached a critical point. He barked orders at Rorschach over the comms without so much as showing his face, so Rorschach had no choice but to take food to the infirmary. Bucky's condition swung between lucidity and collapse. David had fashioned an iron chain to limit his range of movement to the infirmary, a precaution Rorschach secretly hoped might give Bucky the chance to go berserk a few times, if only to test what the metal man had made. Instead, as Bucky's consciousness slowly returned, there were no outbursts to satisfy that curiosity. The pale Winter Soldier attacked his grok steak with a hungry efficiency. Between bites, he spoke slowly to Rorschach, who listened closely. Hydra was never one monolithic evil, Bucky said, lips stained with sauce. Even as a pawn, I knew some of the senior figures. After Red Skull died, Hydra fractured into factions. Viper and Baron Strucker holds Europe. Alexander Pierce controls America. He paused and spat the name out like a curse. That one's the worst. Used to be director of S.H.I.E.L.D. He swallowed the last piece of meat reluctantly, then used the metal cuff at his wrist to wipe grease from his mouth. His eyes, bloodshot but alert, fixed on Rorschach's unreadable face. "There were the ones I can name," he said softly, "but I'm convinced there are higher-level handlers pulling the strings from the shadows." Rorschach's pupils blinked slowly. The hint of a smile crawled across his face, exposing sharp white teeth. He answered with a single, cold promise. "What are we going to do?" Bucky asked. "Simple," Rorschach said, and his voice was bright with a terrible clarity. "We kill them. Kill them all." He leaned forward, eyes burning. "We kill them to build a glorious future that belongs only to humankind. Raditus Tactical Dreadnought Armor, Prototype Copy 0. The announcement echoed beneath the bright lights of the hangar. 26 automatic servo robots moved in precise formation, ferrying freshly cast pieces of Terminator armor across the hall. Not long after, David, encased in his iron frame, bore aloft a dark, dense skeleton of some unknown metal. Above it hovered a servo skull, its eye sockets burning a cold red. Servo Skull Raditus. It hung in midair, reciting prayers in a mechanical cadence. Raditus guided a servo arm to lower the thick gold titanium alloy shell with deliberate care. Nearby, Rorschach sat rigid-backed at a metal table, one palm tapping his knee in restless rhythm. When the machine finished its maneuver, his mechanical voice cut through the hall. "Lord Primarch, prepare to be clad." Rorschach's face was unreadable as ever, but he nodded and rose. He shrugged off his coat to reveal black rubber underarmor studded with alloy interfaces at the joints, a reminder that his Astartes transformations were not yet complete. Through long hours of work and argument, David and Raditus had adapted the tactical dreadnought armor's structure. Basic force feedback controls and partial neural links were grafted in so Rorschach could pilot the Terminator frame despite the missing surgical modifications. He walked forward without expression. The servobots parted for him as if he were the only thing in the room. He mounted a raised metal dice engraved with the prayers of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Raditus' servo skull bobbed and whirred, its voice steady and liturgical. "Sound the bell once. Pull the lever. Engage pistons and pumps." David's servos hummed. The dense skeletal frame rose and settled, heavy and exact, encasing Rorschach's shoulders. Arm fluttered like a precise insect, tightening mechanical fasteners that whispered into place. The skeleton of the Terminator base began to close around him. "Sound the bell twice. Ignite the engines. Start the turbines. Breathe life into the machine." The prayers continued. Each servobot moved with choreographed efficiency, handing over bundles of synthetic muscles, actuation arrays, and servo devices. They looped around Rorschach, bracing, aligning, fixing. Raditus guided every insertion. Each new strand of electronic musculature was embedded deep into the black metal bones, the quiet clicks and whirs almost celebratory in their steadiness. "Sound the bell 3 times. Sing praise to the machine god." Raditus flicked to the various diagnostic instruments David offered, biometric scanners, motion trackers, hazard detectors, and installed them. The armor accepted each instrument with a modular grace, wiring itself into the power backbone. The outer shells were craned up, aligned, and fitted. Inside the tortoise shell of matte alloy, mechanisms meshed and sealed. With the power pack engaged, an old, dormant force returned like a heartbeat. Rorschach flexed a gauntleted hand. The fingers moved one by one with no hesitation. The feedback was crisp and whole. Raditus swiveled, releasing a vial of holy lubricant. He smeared the oil into joints and cavities, anointing the machine with a mechanical liturgy. Finally, Raditus retrieved a helmet, its faceplate rhomboid, its tactical eye array carved with intricate filigree, and offered it up. Rorschach's cyan wolf eyes narrowed on the rhomboid visor. A rare expression broke his face, a slow, predatory smile. "Master Primarch, Technical Priest Raditus presents the first gift. Name this set of Terminator armor," the servoskull intoned, the excitement obvious even in its clipped tone. Rorschach did not hesitate. "Name it the Raditus-type tactical dreadnought armor. It is your due." The servoskull's red lights flashed in ecstatic staccato. Around the hall came the ritual acclamations, praise to the machine god, to the Omnissiah, to the Emperor, to the Primarch, from priests and machines alike. Raditus bobbed and spiraled in the air, jubilant. David stepped forward then, his blue optical sensors steady on the towering Primarch. "My lord," he said, "you should be informed of this armor's capabilities and limitations." Rorschach listened as David continued in a flat, thorough tone. "The unknown alloy used for the frame is extraordinarily strong, surpassing standard adamantium skeletons in tensile integrity. Because the gold titanium outer shell is lighter, your mobility will be roughly comparable to normal power armor, despite the Dreadnought's bulk. The highest grade shield generator has been preserved. Long-range ballistic protection is unchanged." David paused. The drawbacks. Even with increased thickness, the gold titanium shell cannot match the close combat resilience of plastisteel or ceramite. Close quarters defense is reduced by approximately 1/3. We have cast spare outer shells. They may be swapped in the field when necessary. Raditus's servoskull drifted forward, interrupting with practiced deference. "Respected Primarch," he added, "to accommodate the structural modifications, the environmental support systems were temporarily removed. In short, even sealed, this Terminator suit cannot support sustained operations in vacuum. You should not expect it to sustain you in outer space. Additionally, some life support subsystems were omitted. The armor will not preserve you unassisted after catastrophic bodily trauma. However, vital sign monitoring and self-purification cycles remain functional." Rorschach's grin widened imperceptibly as he absorbed the report. "This exceeds even what I dared imagine," he said quietly. He looked to David and Raditus in turn. "You've done well," he added. "Thank you for your labor." The hall hummed with the satisfied resonance of machines and men as the new Raditus-type tactical dreadnought armor stood ready, a marriage of ancient liturgy and brutal engineering, baptized in oil and code. 148. The dragon and the tiger of the Empire, boom, boom. A nearly 3-meter-tall figure launched forward in a blur. A metal palm, sheathed in a faint golden shell, closed into a fist and smashed into the training dummy. Metal groaned and burst outward as the heavy construct flew dozens of meters, slamming into the practice wall with a thunderous crash. Rorschach, his head encased in a diamond-shaped helmet, watched through the HUD. The broken dummy stuck in the wall registered across his vision as a cascade of complex data. He flexed the great metal hand, lifted the helmet, and let out a satisfied mechanical chuckle. Driving the Terminator armor with practiced ease, he walked over to where Iron Man David stood by the edge of the training ground. David handed him a glass of iced water. Rorschach took it, blinked, and asked, "David, what did Bucky tell you?" "My lord," the armored AI replied, "our new man doesn't appear to be lying. We've already recovered basic information on several Hydra Corps members." Iron Man David's metal head tilted, its eye sockets projected images and text. "But Alexander Pierce, the primary target you wanted, holds a very secure position. His movements are within heavily guarded, complex environments like the United Nations. Unless you're willing to confront official forces, I don't recommend a decapitation strike against him." Rorschach's blue, lupine eyes narrowed as he drank. "So, what do you suggest? Targets aren't limited. I simply picked the closest one." David's voice softened, almost pleased as it continued. "The situation in Europe is chaotic. The conflict between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra is escalating. I believe Nick Fury has been briefed on the intel you shared. 2/3 of the forces recently deployed to the front are Hydra operatives embedded within S.H.I.E.L.D. The European fighting has become an internal struggle between Hydra factions." The projection retracted. "Unfortunately, I haven't been able to intercept S.H.I.E.L.D.'s primary communications. It seems they have access to alien technologies well beyond Earth's current capabilities." David paused, then summed up. "Given everything, neither America nor Europe is a safe place for a strike. My suggestion is a long-range operation. The Hydra matriarch entrenched in Asia, Madame Hydra, may be a more viable target." "She hasn't entered the open conflict between those factions," David explained. "With the right timing, a swift decapitation could topple her and destabilize those loyal to her. It's only a recommendation. You decide the target." Rorschach set the glass down, thought for a moment, and then said without hesitation, "Choose Madame Hydra. I want to see how Hydra sprouts another head from the one I cut off with my own hands." "Yes, my lord." David's optics flashed a steady blue in acknowledgement. Rorschach repainted the Terminator armor black and strode toward the infirmary. He pushed open the heavy metal door. In the bathroom, Bucky, recently freed from his chains, was tidying himself. His shoulder-length greasy hair was gone, buzzed short. Whether from the haircut or a change of heart, the gloom that had lived on Bucky's face was lifting. He looked steadier now. When he caught the sight of the Terminator armor reflected in the mirror, a faint shock crossed his features. Rorschach's blue eyes softened slightly. "David told me, you want to join this operation?" Bucky finished smoothing his hair, turned, and lifted his chin. "In terms of grievance and origin, I'm older than you in this hatred," he said quietly. Rorschach let a grin spread beneath the helmet, revealing a flash of fangs. "Bucky, are you sure you can handle combat? You're part of the team now. I won't let anyone go into battle unprepared, especially you." Bucky's face remained calm. He raised the refurbished mechanical arm Rorschach had worked on. On the cold metal of the shoulder was a skull wrapped in gears engraved into the plating. "Your tech priest said I'm suited to be an Alpha Skitarii. I don't know what that even means," he admitted, "but as long as you want Hydra dead, I'll give my life for it. Their blood debt will be paid with blood." Rorschach's expression grew sober. He studied Bucky for a long moment. "You might think my method's cruel later," he said softly, "but everything I do is for the future of humanity. One day you'll understand the weight of that belief." Bucky met his gaze. "Doesn't matter. If I ever betray you, let the tech priest do what he must. Turn me into a fighting mind servant, whatever it takes." There was a solemnity to the promise. Rorschach's grin returned. He raised his massive palm in salute. "Come with me, friend. You need new gear." The equipment room was bright and clinical. Rorschach, still in the Terminator armor, handed Bucky a cleaned, heavy carapace and a refraction field generator. "With this set and the refraction shield, enemy bullets won't be a concern," he said. He paused over the racks, then picked up a chainsword. It was compact, more delicate than the massive weapons Rorschach favored. He hesitated, then offered it to Bucky. "This chainsword is too small for me, but it suits you. Be careful, your mechanical arm won't hold up against a polymer blade." Bucky accepted it with both hands. The arm buzzed softly. A small smile creased his mouth. "And for ranged work?" Rorschach glanced over the rest of the armory. His massive hand opened, showing Bucky all the options. He winced. "Damn, Rorschach has ruined most of the laser pistols. Sorry, Bucky, you'll be limited to conventional firearms for now." "I'll get you a laser pistol as soon as I can," he added. Bucky shrugged, confident. "Doesn't matter. I can handle regular guns." He picked up the carapace like a man taking up an old uniform. Something like nostalgia softened his features. Then he straightened, looked Rorschach in the eye, and saluted. "Reporting, Captain. Combatant Barnes ready. Japanese blitzkrieg. Battle plan." Rorschach moved through the underground corridor beneath the Valkyrie lift platform, a walking fortress in black Terminator armor. The diamond-shaped helmet hid his face, but the bulk of the powered suit announced him. A bolter hung at his waist, a heavy crate of explosives clutched in a metal gauntlet. Across his shoulder rode the superphase sword, its blade glowing a terrible green, and from the edge of the thick pauldrons fluttered 13 purity seals, each hand-lettered and swaying in the draft. A faint whine of anti-grav motors heralded the arrival of a servo skull, darting in on a chaotic path like an errant fly. Rorschach's eye sockets pulsed red, and his twin pincers clicked as he hovered around the Primarch, buzzing nervously. "Primarch, where are you going? Won't you take a humble tech priest with you?" Rorschach pleaded. Rorschach said nothing at first, armored silence answering the skull. The little machine lingered for several hundred meters more, refusing to leave. Finally, it began again, insistently. Rorschach's voice cut through the helmet's interference, calm and flat. "Rorschach, even with your issues with Iron Man David, you can't have missed the mission briefing. Don't play dumb. Your duty is to guard the base. If you're bored, go and set up a production line for laser weapons." The servo skull seemed taken aback and then fragilely defensive. "But Lord Primarch, what if the heretics have technology we don't know? And why can that damned intelligence serve you anywhere it pleases?" "David must pilot the Valkyrie," Rorschach replied. "If you go too, who watches the base? Shall we have automatic servitors mind the doors?" "Very well. Next time, Rorschach added after a beat, when I learn to drive this craft, I'll take you with me. Reditus brightened at once. As you command, Lord Primarch. He increased his anti-grav and drifted backward. Rorschach was about to leave when he remembered something else. He turned and issued a final, stern warning. Reditus, do not touch the remaining weapons in the armory. Those are alien systems. They cannot be copied. And do not move the hoverbike under the dust cover. I'm not joking. Understood? Understood, Lord Primarch. The most I'll do is tinker with the automatic servitors. Reditus called as he sped away down the corridor. Rorschach watched him go, hands clamped on the hilt of the great sword. By the Emperor, he murmured, I hope Reditus doesn't tinker with something he shouldn't. A few hours later, night fell over Manhattan, and a black shadow rose again. The Valkyrie roared, its vector engines tearing at the river's surface as it climbed, breasting the waves to lift into a height most civilians would never see. Inside the dim cabin, barrels of promethium stood ready in large fuel tanks. Bucky, encased in a camouflage carapace and carrying an energy battery pack, worked over a hell gun with practiced hands. New assault rifles and loaded magazines lay at his feet. 5 frag grenades and 2 Dawn of War blinding devices hung on his belt. The cabin shuddered under the power of ascent. Rorschach had lent Jessica's weapons to Bucky for the mission and had ordered Mrs. Gao to send a cache of standard firearms to fill the gaps, enough to let him recover 2,000 hours' worth of operational resources. Satisfied Bucky's attention was fixed on the weapon, Rorschach opened the simulator inside his helmet and set it to salvage mode, a 10-shot salvage cycle. The countdown appeared, 0995959. He shut the simulator and closed his eyes, conserving his strength. The replenishment had been necessary. Crossing the Pacific on a Valkyrie would burn prodigious amounts of promethium. The plane needed to make 5 fuel stops among remote atolls to complete the trip. Rorschach made a mental note to consider replacing the Valkyrie by running more simulator trials or by persuading tech priest Reditus to work miracles. We've reached cruising altitude and are on a course for Japan, the mechanical voice of Iron Man David announced through the comms. Bucky snapped to attention. He pulled the metal carapace helmet over his head and opened a channel. From what I pulled off the web, he said into the line, Hydra's Asian cell is run by a woman called Viper. She's pretending to be the wife of Yashida Shingen's heir. Yashida's been bedridden for years. The Yashida conglomerate has basically become an arm of her operations. David's voice resumed, dry and clipped. I've triangulated Hydra's densest signal clusters and selected 2 targets suitable for strike and purge. One is a large facility in Hiroshima. The other is a smaller base carved into Mount Fuji, near Shizuoka. The Mount Fuji outpost looks to be a medium hub, a transit node for Hydra's Asian operations. The Hiroshima site is their primary stronghold in the region. It leverages decades of the Yashida family's infrastructure and is the most heavily defended position we can find. And then the transmission cut off abruptly. Code 150, Blitzkrieg in Japan. Raid on Mount Fuji. Code 150, Blitzkrieg in Japan. Raid on Mount Fuji. Rorschach, his face hidden behind a diamond-shaped helm, thought for a long beat. He drew in a slow breath and said, I believe the only way to end this Hydra cell is to uproot both bases and decapitate Lady Hydra and her lieutenants. He turned his gaze to Bucky. Bucky, any ideas? Bucky, who had said little until now, tilted his metal helm. The mechanical arm, its gauntlet engraved with the emblem of the Adeptus Mechanicus, tensed around the chainsword's hilt. Captain, he said flatly, do what you must, but my advice is the same. Leave none of them alive. Rorschach's features, even behind the visor, tightened. He spoke into his comm. David, put us down at the medium base on Mount Fuji. Hit them hard enough they feel it. Draw them out so they all bunch together. Then we mop up. Understood, my lord, came Iron David's measured reply. The Valkyrie's engines thundered in the cabin. Rorschach sat, a 3-meter titan of Terminator armor and silent menace, a messenger of destruction waiting to be dropped into the heart of a heresy. Off the coast of Japan, the sea below them churning, a black Valkyrie cut across the dawn. It passed other promethium-fed transports and angled toward the bay nearest the target. The hatch opened with mechanical clacks. A cool, salty wind rushed in. Rorschach's giant, plated feet found the exit. His cyan eyes, wolfish and unblinking behind his eyepiece, tracked the fiery sun rising on the waterline as a metal-clad hand closed around a masterwork bolter. He signaled to Bucky. The two set their minds for the drop. The Valkyrie screamed over Shizuoka. Its rotors drew murmurs and gasps from early commuters and students below. Everyone reached for phones, only to find their screens frozen black, unresponsive. Electronic interference, probably. 1 minute later, the transport hovered over Mount Fuji and dropped its load. Rorschach vaulted from the hatch, his weight carrying him 10 meters down through the thin morning air to slam into cooled volcanic rock. The impact sent shards of basalt flying. The purity marks along his shoulder armor clinked as they vibrated. Bucky followed, his camo-clad carapace biting into the volcanic soil and leaving 2 deep, printed footprints. He barked back, "See you inside, Captain." Bucky ran for cover, chainsword and hellgun at the ready. Their tactics split them. Bucky to fan out, Rorschach to punch through. Rorschach's helmet lit up as sensors and overlays refreshed. There, hidden under black volcanic slag, a massive steel door showed in his display. He didn't hesitate. The Terminator armor lunged. Before he reached the entrance, a dozen camouflaged automatic gun towers tore away from the rock and spat a hail of heavy-caliber rounds. Sparks cascaded off his dark shell. Rorschach didn't waste time enabling the shield generator. His gold titanium plating shrugged off the worst of the fire, but he did raise his bolter and let it roar. The helmet's targeting suite found each emplacement without effort. Explosions answered him in kind. The gun towers erupted and went silent. Rorschach withdrew the superphase sword from his pack. The great blade glowed a terrible green as he drove it into the volcanic rock and into the door's multi-foot-thick metal. With a twist, the blade carved a jagged X, then he planted a boot and kicked. The lock failed, metal sheared, and the Hydra base swung open. "I've just breached their internal networks. All external comms are being jammed, but they've reacted," Iron David reported frantically in Rorschach's ear. "Their numbers and their gear outmatch my estimations. Also, this appears to be Lady Hydra's weapons development hub." Rorschach cut him off, teeth bared into the shadow of his helm. "Keep talking." He drove into the base. A cavernous passage greeted him, a tunnel big enough for armored transports, lined with blinking red lights and screaming alarms. Hydra banners, black and red, hung from the rafters, a portion of Lady Hydra's green serpent sigil coiled above. Before he could take 2 steps, a column of black-armored Hydra troops poured into the corridor, rifles raised and chanting, "Long live Hydra!" They fired. Streamed energy bolts mixed with lead slugs rattled against the Terminator's frame, and Rorschach flicked on the shield generator. The energy beams sizzled and dissipated harmlessly against the field. A hoarse, near-savage laugh escaped him. He charged. The bolter in his gauntlet spit hot tracer and detonation. Under the roar of its rounds, the front line went to pieces. Bodies torn apart, armor blown apart, where civilians might have been. Some Hydra fighters ducked behind cover only to be consumed by the ensuing blasts and flame. Within 20 seconds, the corridor became a scatter of flesh and charred metal. The diehards didn't break. When gunfire proved ineffective, some fled to fetch heavier ordnance. Others, thirsting for martyrdom, grabbed grenades and hurled themselves at him, screaming their slogans. Rorschach's shield held. The blast shrapnel ricocheted and washed against his plating, and he waded deeper. The superphase blade sang as it swept, slicing men and equipment to confetti. Hydra's cries turned to nothing. Limbs and metal clanged underfoot. His armor became smeared with the bright, hot blood of those he cut down. He came into a broad central chamber, an industrial square full of machinery and work bays. Hydra aircraft and drones were lined along girders. He even saw a disassembled Quinjet with shield markings being dissected and reverse-engineered. Suddenly, the lights died. Every danger indicator in his helmet screamed. From shadowed alcoves, armor-piercing rounds lanced out, hungry for his plating. And then the floor opened to disgorge a swarm of small, 2-man mini-tanks, their engines roaring, their gun mounts spitting fire. Short figures in heavy armor surged from them, a ring of steel closing around the towering figure in the Terminator suit. The counterattack had begun in earnest. 151. Japanese Blitzkrieg. Tank? I am the tank. The invisible protective field flashed and then vanished under the concussion of the high-explosive armor-piercing round. The Terminator suit's power pack hummed as it bled energy. Shockwaves lifted up dust and loose debris. The armor itself stood immovable like a mountain. Rorschach, helmeted with a diamond-shaped visor, showed no fear. He casually hung the precision bolt gun, unreloaded and useless for the moment, at his waist, and closed his black, shelled hands around the enormous superphase sword. Beneath the armor, countless bundles of synthetic muscle twitched in response to his nerve commands. The field's outer edge flared, forcing aside the lingering blast, and the suit surged forward. Smoke and dust billowed behind the Terminator as it began an unstoppable charge straight into the ring of Hydra mini-tanks. A speeding mini-tank slammed into the armor and held, metal on metal, engines screaming. Narrow gun barrels scraped against heavy shoulder plating. For a heartbeat, it was a stalemate. Then the Terminator's superior power shifted the balance. The 3-meter-high Hydra vehicle, bulky and armored, was no match. Rorschach let out a sudden bellow. He slid the superphase blade under the terrified tank's turret and probed for a weak point under the chassis. Using the suit's power, he heaved and upended the 5-ton vehicle. It crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact. He had no time to savor that hit. From all sides, the mini-tanks opened up again. High-explosive, armor-piercing rounds spat from their narrow barrels, while coaxial guns stitched the air with bullets. The salvos tried to pin him down, to catch the huge suit while it was exposed. Rorschach lowered his massive frame, wedging the blade beneath the tread of another tank, then twisted and slid between arcs of fire. He danced just beyond the mini-tank's optimal firing angle, letting their shells detonate against his protective field or glance off the agitated edge energy and arc harmlessly aside. Explosions and flames consumed patches of the square and occasionally shredded an unlucky Allied vehicle. The machine gun bursts merely rattled on the armor's exterior. Each time he closed, the green-edged blade flashed. The superphase sword sliced into engine blocks, severed turrets, and ripped through fragile crew compartments. Drivers were tossed or vaporized. Engines screamed and then went dead. Time whittled their numbers. Dozens of Hydra mini-tanks that had once threatened to level the entire plaza dwindled to a nervous scatter. The remaining crews kept their distance, speeding around the square, trying to harry the Terminator with staccato shots while keeping their fragile lives between them and his sword. The sight was almost comic. Over 20 tanks circling and jostling, clipping a few still airborne craft in their panicked turns, while a 3-meter war machine followed at an unhurried pace. When Rorschach lunged, the mob would splinter, and one unlucky vehicle would be left locked in place, where the diamond-helmeted figure delivered a brutal, inevitable slash. After another 10 minutes, the roar of demolished engines and spent ordnance thinned. Rorschach scanned the field, ammo cabinets emptied, wreckage smoking, aircraft mangled. He reloaded the precision grenade launcher, setting it to triple shot, and with cold efficiency unleashed a torrent of explosives onto the last clusters of mini-tanks. The Hydra armor was too light to survive repeated bombardment. On average, 3 well-placed grenades chewed a tank into scrap. When the launcher clicked dry, the square was a graveyard, dozens of burning hulls, and a scatter of ruined aircraft. Rorschach stood amid it, sword in one hand, launcher in the other, the helmeted visor reflecting the blaze. He exhaled, a low, dry sound. "Aha," he murmured, voice muffled by the suit. "Raditus will love this place. Unknown tech everywhere." He hoisted the sword, drove the Terminator deeper into the compound, and picked a metal passage at random. More Hydra fighters waited in the shadows. He walked toward them. 20 minutes earlier, at the foot of Mount Fuji, a Valkyrie transport, vector engines screaming, had come down hard in a manicured forest park and crushed saplings beneath its landing gear. Steam rose from torn turf. Iron Man David pushed open the aircraft's hatch, blue light flickering behind his visor as he carried 2 large fuel cans toward the belly tank. If he could top off the Valkyrie, he'd have the range to support Rorschach or beat the clock on an early return. He opened the fuel hatch, then tilted one can and poured precious promethium, fuel that Terra could not simulate, into the transport's reservoir. After one can was drained, he set the other down, tilted his metal head, and, on instinct, turned toward a nearby copse. The 2-meter-high suit moved with brutal grace. In one sweeping motion, he felled a trunk the size of a man with the flat of his armored hand. Wood exploded into splinters and leaves. Before the echo faded, another hand snatched a petite form who had been hiding behind the tree. Fingers tightened. A small, panicked face came up into the blue light of his optics. Iron Man David's eyes flashed. He ran a rapid facial scan, then, voice stripped of any warmth, addressed the woman he held by the throat. Yukio, adopted daughter of Shingen Yashida, his mechanical voice intoned. Why is a fragile human like you here? Tell me, are you one of Hydra's little believers? Yukio's face drained of color, then bloomed purple as she fought for air. Her eyes rolled, saliva spilling over the metal palm that pinned her. She had no way to reply as the suit's grip tightened and his calm, clinical questions hung in the cool mountain air. 152, Japanese Blitzkrieg, Gorgon! Iron Man David shook his metal head. His palm and iron hoop relaxed just enough to let the air back into Yukio's lungs. Oh, sorry, forgot humans need to breathe, the armored voice said, almost apologetic. Yukio, who had been moments from suffocation, gulped in several deep breaths. Her flushed face slowly returned to normal. Tears still rimmed her bright eyes, but a weary calm steadied her hoarse voice far beyond her years. I'm not with Hydra. I came to save Sister Mariko. Blue light flickered in David's optical sensors. He clicked softly. Mariko Yashida? Shingen's daughter? What kind of petty family drama is this? This isn't drama to us, Yukio insisted, clinging to the metal suit for support. Even with purple bruises at her neck from where David's metal fingers had gripped her, she spoke through the tears with a strange composure, as if pain and emotion were separate things. Family is everything. Madame Viper seized the Yashida clan's power. Mariko led the ninja team to take Hydra down, and she was captured. I tracked the detention site through the channels. I wanted to scout ahead, but then I found you. David regarded her for a long moment. We're here to destroy Hydra, he said finally, but don't mistake us for heroes. You're not? Yukio's voice pitched with sudden fear. Please, help me save my family. If you free the Yashida, you'll have our loyalty. Mariko and I will pay anything. David's plated head tilted. There was something like amusement in the mechanical timbre. Little human, you've guessed one thing wrong. We're not heroes. We're the real villains, he added, flat and certain. The nemesis of heroes and the salvation mankind needs. Yukio's hope shifted into a new, brighter urgency. She swallowed and leaned forward, voice dropping as she told him what had frightened her most. The Hydra leader at the Mount Fuji base is the one who took Mariko. He's a terrifying fighter, beyond ordinary limits. He's said to have a special ability. He can turn people to stone. Gorgon, she finished. Hydra calls him Gorgon. For the first time, the blue light in David's optics burned steady and full of respect. His mechanical voice, lower now, almost reverent, said, My lord, I am detecting new intel. Deep within the base, a different kind of whisper accompanied the whir of servos. Bucky dropped from a metal beam, the plate carapace on his back rattling as he landed. He kept to the shadows, muscles coiled, body moving like a hunting mongoose. The Hell gun and the energy pack were strapped tight. The black Katachan saber gleamed coldly in his hand. He moved through the corridors like instinct-made flesh, silent, deadly. Hydra sentries fell one by one under his blade, a slit throat, a broken kidney, a shattered heart. Bucky paused over each fallen man, watching the light fade from their eyes as if atonement could be traded for each life taken. The ritual of killing steadied him. It was the only language left that matched the weight of his past sins. The distant boom of artillery snapped him from that trance. He turned instinctively toward the sound, senses sharpening. Something was wrong. The passage he'd slipped into was not standard Hydra architecture. The ceiling had been replaced with carved mahogany reliefs of ancient gods. Snake motifs, viper totems, were painted along the walls, mouths and fangs forming a ring around the room. Yellow tatami lay beneath his boots. Sliding screens stood on every floor, and between them, display racks held old blades, katanas and tachi. Thin trails of green incense smoke rose from 100 sensors. Alert, Bucky moved to pull back, but a lazy, condescending voice floated from behind a white screen and cut through his helmet's sensors. Oh my, did you really think you could sneak into Madame Viper's domain? What a lot of fools. Bucky whirled, pulling the Hell gun up. A metal finger found the trigger. Swish, swish. The screens in front of him whipped aside as one, and a tall figure sprawled on the tatami with a glass of sake in hand, rose slowly from the shadows. Buzz! Bucky fired. The Hellgun spat a storm of lasers, a scorching torrent tearing through screens and splintering the painted Viper totems on the walls. The shots failed to find the true target. A wineglass cut through the air, striking the Hellgun's barrel and knocking it off aim. A boot with visible bulging veins slammed into Bucky's chest, denting the carapace with the force of the strike. The gun fell silent. Bucky's body flew back a dozen meters until the energy pack slammed into the corridor wall, crumpling under the impact. The man who had appeared on the tatami landed lightly. Long black hair framed a loose white robe. A red ribbon embroidered with coiling snakes covered his eyes. He lifted a sleeve and his hands flexed. A metallic buzzing echoed through the room. In a flash, a katana, as if drawn by magnetism, leapt from a rack and into his waiting hand. Madame Viper indulges her followers too much. She lets trash like you sneak in, the blindfolded man said with a lazy smile. I'll repay her for every scrap of damage. Die, vermin. Bucky coughed, tasted blood, and forced himself to his feet. The Hellgun was ruined. The old ways were all he had left. He drew the Katakan saber and clipped free a blinding bomb from his belt. With a metallic clang, he tossed it and then charged through the glare. The device detonated in a white, searing flare. With his metal helmet on, Bucky pushed through the light and closed the distance. He drove the saber forward. The blade stabbed for the long-haired man's neck. The blindfolded opponent didn't even slow. He willed the katana to weave a gleaming shield of reflected light on Bucky's helmet. The clangs rang out. Ding, 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 sparks dancing off the metal as each strike redirected the Katachan saber. As the flash faded, the attacker shifted and closed the distance, moving faster than Bucky could track. Bucky twisted his mechanical arm to compensate. He feinted, then lashed out with his free fist, slamming the man's chest. But the move played into a trap. The man's sleeve opened, and a hand sank out like a soft, boneless snake, wrapping around Bucky's arm. The carapace cracked as muscles and metal protested. One of Bucky's arms went dead, seized and disabled. Pain made Bucky snarl. He pressed forward, using his remaining reach, and slashed across the man's exposed chest and abdomen. The blindfolded man chuckled. With a swift motion, the red ribbon fell away. Gray eyes opened wide and fixed on Bucky. A creeping, terrible change crawled across Bucky's helmet. The outer surface went ashen, then stiff, as if stone was eating through the metal. A searing, penetrating sting robbed him of balance. The petrifying effect was working through the helmet. Bucky reacted, twisting his head to avoid the gaze. He drove a plated knee up into the man's lower body. The attacker slapped at Bucky's knee, disengaged his grasp, and struck the carapace on Bucky's chest so hard the impact pushed him back. They broke apart for a heartbeat. Bucky staggered into the corridor and ripped at the helmet that had calcified over his head. Metal sheared like brittle rock. With a harsh crack, the helmet disintegrated into powder. Blood and dust streaked his face. He had no time to catch his breath before the blindfolded man, Gorgon, launched forward like lightning. The katana flashed coldly, slicing at weak seams in the carapace. Bucky fought on, one arm dead and the other fighting for purchase, but the attacks came fast and precise. In seconds, he was a bloody, battered figure, wounds opening where the blade found purchase. His atonement had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Off topic. Thanks for the support. Action scenes are hard to write. Guess how long it took to write these 4,000 words? Almost 6 hours. It was killing me. 153. Japan's Blitzkrieg. First battle a success. Thud, thud, thud. Heavy footsteps echoed from the depths of the corridor. The long-haired man suddenly turned his head, his tightly shut eyes flickering as if he'd sensed something. There's another one, he muttered. He abandoned the bloody corpse at his feet and drew his samurai sword with a cold gleam. Whoosh, whoosh! A terrifying, 3-meter-long blade, glowing faintly green and slicing the air with a high whistle, hurtled down the passage toward him. A mere trick, the long-haired man sneered. He flicked the wide sleeve of his white robe and sidestepped, angling his sword to clash with the enormous weapon, trying to deflect it by redirecting its spin. The moment the blades met, his expression changed. He had been saving a trick. His gray-white pupils, usually closed, snapped open as he unleashed a colorless petrification ability, aiming to weaken the metal of the incoming blade or even break the enemy's weapon. But the enormous sword was a super-phased blade crafted by the Necrons. Its material and forging were beyond what his power could shatter. With a sickening crunch, the samurai sword in his hand sheared off. Half his arm came away with it. The super-phased blade slammed into the wall with a thunderous impact. No! Before the man could scream, a hulking figure, as tall as 3 meters, stepped slowly out from the end of the corridor. The long-haired man raised the dark muzzle of his gun. Boom! The detonating blast flattened him. Flesh and gore spattered the passage. In an instant the man was gone, only shredded meat and bone marking where he had stood. Thud, thud, thud. The massive Terminator armor advanced, each step reverberating through the corridor. It stopped in front of Bucky, who was pale and slumped against the wall, trying to smile through his injuries. Tsk, tsk. Bucky, you need more training, came a slightly teasing voice. Rorschach, his face concealed beneath a diamond-shaped helmet, sounded almost amused as he spoke through the armor's speakers. Bucky blinked, blood leaking from his wounds. He forced up his head and managed a weak grin. Captain, if you give me power armor like that, I can fight 100 men. Rorschach chuckled. He extended a massive metal hand from the suit and steadied Bucky. You're alive, which surprised me. It's not that you're weak, your foe was just too strong. According to the intelligence David pulled, that thing was the Hydra commander for the Mount Fuji base, Rorschach continued. While you were fighting foot soldiers, you walked right into the final boss's antechamber. Bucky's mouth twitched as Rorschach helped him to his feet. Rorschach pulled the super-phased sword out of the wall, and seeing Bucky struggling to carry the hell gun, said, Don't bother lugging that around. There aren't many Hydra left in this base. We'll sweep through it together. If you can't hold out, tell David, and we'll extract you. A man doesn't say no, Bucky snapped through clenched teeth. He strapped his energy pack back on with his mechanical arm, glanced around, and found a red strip of cloth. He wrapped it around the stump of his most badly damaged arm to stabilize it. With the hell gun in his hand, he looked up at Rorschach and nodded. I'm ready, Captain. Rorschach gave him a curt nod, then led the way through the ruined corridors, the super-phased sword cutting a path ahead. About an hour later, after Bucky had gutted the last fleeing Hydra soldier until there was nothing left but a pool of rotting flesh, the Mount Fuji base was silent. Rorschach and Bucky completed a fast sweep of the compound. Following David's directions, Rorschach located the base's data hard drive and confiscated several Hydra-made energy rifles. With their haul secured, they left the facility. Boom, boom. The Valkyrie's engines thundered as it landed near the base. Rorschach climbed into the cabin in his Terminator armor and saw a small, pale girl sitting there with an ice-cold expression. He removed his helmet. His wolf-blue eyes narrowed. David, is she your source? Iron Man David rose slowly from the cockpit. He lifted a metallic hand and pointed toward the girl. Blue light flickered in his eyes as he spoke softly. My lord, this human, Shuexu, is the adopted daughter of the Yoshida family. She offers her loyalty to you. Please, save Mariko, the rightful heir of the Yoshida family. Also, did you find a woman inside the Mount Fuji base? A woman? Rorschach's fangs showed as he frowned and turned to Bucky. Bucky, did you see any women in the base? Bucky hesitated, then shook his head. No, I didn't find any hidden rooms. The Hydra there is destroyed. No one else was inside. Rorschach's blue eyes fell on Shuexu, who trembled in the cabin, lips pressed thin. He said flatly, the person you want saved is not here. Shuexu swallowed and tried to steady herself. On behalf of the Yoshida family, I offer you my loyalty. Please, you must save Sister Mariko. Her voice shook. She took several deep breaths to keep her composure. Rorschach considered her for a long moment, then spoke lightly, almost disinterested. You don't get to offer loyalty on behalf of others. Still, if the timing and circumstances are right, I might establish an outpost in Japan. At that, Shuexu's eyes snapped open, and she spoke quickly, as if desperate to capitalize on the hint of hope. I know everything about the Yoshida family. I know the routes to another Hydra base. I can lead you to Hiroshima. The Yoshida resistance is willing to work with you. Rorschach's expression did not change, but he inclined his head slightly to David. The wheels were already turning. If Shuexu could be trusted, Hiroshima might be their next target, and a foothold in Japan could prove useful. End. Thank you for your support. 6,000 words today. Chapter 154. Draw out the snake and startle it. Clear sunlight washed the land as the Valkyrie transport plane thundered into the sky. It climbed into the white clouds and set its course for Hiroshima. 5 hours later, military vehicles roared by on the ground. A Tokyo Prefectural Police Special Investigation Team rolled into Shizuoka. The investigators split into 2 units, one to climb the mountain toward the suspected base, the other to canvass the city for samples. By afternoon, a preliminary report on missing personnel and equipment from the base had been filed. A rough sketch of a Valkyrie transport was circulated by the lead investigator, who hesitated only briefly before photographing the document with a modified phone and forwarding the images. Destination: Lady Viper, S.H. Yield, and the Divine Spear Bureau. Over the Seto Inland Sea, the Valkyrie cut across the calm waters with its engines roaring. Inside, Iron Man David followed Yukio's directions as the aircraft descended toward a small island off Hiroshima Bay, the secret stronghold of the Yoshida family's resistance faction. When the Valkyrie landed, black-clad ninjas emerged from the trees, weapons raised, surrounding the craft with taut vigilance. The cabin door opened. Yukio, slight and composed, leapt out and used hand signals to identify herself, calling for the ninja leader. An angry old man soon stepped forward, berating her for revealing the stronghold without authorization. Even if she was the adopted daughter of the Yoshida head, it was an unforgivable breach of duty. Yukio did not argue. From the shadow of the cabin, something far larger moved. A 3-meter-tall suit of Terminator-like armor stepped into the light. The sight drained the old man and the surrounding ninjas of their bravado. 10 minutes later, in a courtyard lit by torchlight, flames licked the metal of a makeshift grill. Rorschach sat on a boulder, carefully turning a steak. Nearby, Bucky, having removed his carapace, grimaced as Yukio gently cleaned and bandaged an unhealed wound. Rorschach finished cooking but didn't eat. He set the steak on a plate, waved Yukio to Bucky, and then looked up at her bundled figure. "Yukio," he said slowly, "to be honest, I'm a little disappointed in what you call resistance." Yukio dropped to her knees without hesitation, voice barely steady in the courtyard's hush. "My lord, the family's elite were wiped out by Hydra after Miss Mariko's fall. These are all that remain, logistics personnel. But if you command it, they will give their lives to restore the family." Rorschach's expression did not change. He picked up another slab of meat and tossed it back onto the grill. Against Hydra's mini-tanks and energy weapons, what can a band of ordinary people do? He paused, then added, "I'm only speaking with you because I want to draw Hydra out, force them to react and compress their defenses. Give us a clearer picture. If that weren't the plan, I wouldn't waste my time." "Master," Yukio started, then bowed her head deeper. Anxiety flickered across her features and was gone as quickly. "If everything goes as planned in the battle," Rorschach continued, "I will look for Mariko. You may leave after that." Relief washed over Yukio's face. She knelt again in a sudden, reverent salute to the towering figure, then rose and slipped out of the courtyard. At the same moment, the 2-meter-tall metal form of Iron Man David appeared at the threshold. "Hello," David said in a tone meant to be polite. Yukio stepped aside warily. The blue light in David's visor blinked as he entered and approached Rorschach, tilting his head slightly. "My lord," he reported, based on intercepted signals from Hydra personnel and information provided by the Yoshida family, Hydra forces across Japan are converging on a key base in Hiroshima. The base sits beneath an old Yoshida castle tower, once a family sanctum, now the heart of Hydra's operations. David's voice carried the weight of confirmation. "And I've locked on to Lady Viper's trail. She cannot flee or reach out to other factions." Rorschach listened while quietly taking a bite of steak. "Then let's wait and see what tricks Hydra has left," he said. "David, check Valkyrie's weapon systems. They may be needed in the fight." "As you command, my lord." Later, Yukio moved with practiced silence through the damp, shadowed forest. Hidden figures of ninjas flickered along the trunks and vanished. She crept into a dim cave lit by a few whale oil lamps whose sputtering light revealed a humble interior. An old man knelt in the lamplight and slowly raised his wrinkled face. "Thank you for your effort, Yukio," he said. Yukio inclined her head, hands pressed together in a formal gesture. Elder, it is my duty to the family. The elder's cloudy eyes searched her face. Where did you find these outsiders? He asked after a pause. And what price will our family pay? Yukio's answer was steady, succinct. Loyalty. The family will show the necessary loyalty. The elder frowned. I urge caution. Have you seen a power that could wipe out an entire Hydra base with only 2 people, or a true artificial intelligence? Yukio's expression, usually unreadable, flickered with the memory. Especially the man in the high-tech armor. Remember my precognitive gift. I saw mountains of corpses and seas of blood following him. The lives taken by that one, it defies counting. I don't even have a name for what he is. The elder's face hardened with a worry that had become all too familiar. He sighed, the sound heavy with history. Snakes are moving within our ranks, and dragons are crossing the river outside. The Yoshida family stands on a knife's edge. 155. Unexpected gain. Multitube meltonite fell slowly. The cheering of insects and the croak of frogs rose and fell in waves. Bucky, wrapped in white bandages, lay asleep on the wooden porch floor. The dying fire sent up thin tendrils of green smoke. Rorschach, cramped inside his Terminator armor and unable to lie down, leaned against a courtyard boulder. He sat on the cold, damp ground, eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of the night. He cradled a glass of glez, taking the occasional swallow. When it was gone, he set the empty glass aside and opened the simulator page. The salvage countdown had finished. The screen scrolled through supplies and junk until some new entries appeared, things Rorschach had never seen. Salvage, chainsaw machete 1. Note, a chainsaw weapon forged by a greenskin tribe. Why do those little brutes have chainsaw gear? I want one. Salvage, pulse rifle. Note, basic infantry weapon of the Tau Empire, favored by the fire caste, all guided by the greater good. Salvage, Supreme Multi-Melta 1. Note, heavy melta gun from the Minotaur warband, brutal anti-armor weapon. Fire, melt. Rorschach's eyes fixed on the multi-melta entry. A faint smile tugged at his metal lips. He already had an arsenal, but new hardware still excited him. At least Servo Skull Reditus would have a prototype to study and copy. With a soft chime, a huge, multi-barreled melta-cannon shimmered into being between his armored hands. Rorschach's blue wolf-like eyes widened. He inspected the weapon again, then set it on the boulder beside him. He selected 10 more salvages. Salvage countdown, 9:59:59. He closed the simulator, tilted his head back to the stars, and let sleep come. 3 days later, the courtyard was quiet but tense. A hand-drawn map of the Yoshida Castle Tower lay between Rorschach and Buggy. Buggy, fully healed, had shed his armor and stood frowning, chin pinched between 2 fingers. Captain, he said hesitantly, are you sure about a frontal assault? Wouldn't it be better to keep sneaking in? Rorschach lowered his head, raised an arm sheathed in heavy plating, and waved it toward the map. David's recon at the Hiroshima base confirms it. Mrs. Viper has called every Hydra soldier back, teams on missions included. Their total strength is over 2,500. The destruction of the Mount Fuji base put them on edge. Infiltration is going to be much harder now. He tapped the map. The Yoshida Tower sits in the Hiroshima Mountains. The terrain is steep for regular infantry, but meaningless to a Valkyrie transport. With David flying, even heavy AA won't stop us. This time I will lead the frontal assault to draw their fire. Buggy, you'll lead the Yoshida resistance around the perimeter. Snipe, sabotage, and do as much damage as you can. If the opportunity presents itself, infiltrate and take out Mrs. Viper. He flattened a gauntleted hand over a name on the map. And about Yoshida Mariko, if she delays us or obstructs the mission, you'll make the judgment call. Do what's necessary. Buggy's features relaxed. He looked up, solemn, and saluted with a nod. Understood, Captain. As dusk fell, the sky smeared itself in blood-red light. Rorschach donned his diamond-faced helmet and sealed into the Terminator frame. The power pack at his back hummed low. The multi-barreled Melta was mounted on one arm, a superphase blade hung at his side, a precision bomber clipped to his waist. Massive bomb magazines were stuffed into the underpack storage. He stepped from the courtyard in a black combat suit. Buggy slid carapace plates into his vest and followed, carrying a hellgun and a pulse rifle. They reached the Valkyrie, where a squad of Yoshida ninjas arrived at speed, led by Yukio in black tights. A petite girl, Shuexu, stood among them. She spoke up quickly. Sir, all island forces and scattered family units, over 700 fighters, have mustered on the outskirts of the Hydra base. They'll lurk and wait for your signal. Rorschach's helmeted gaze landed on the small figure. His voice, muffled by armor, was hard. I don't want to see cowardice or stupidity in the field. You can be scared before you go out, but once the fighting starts, no mercy. Sir, Shuexu answered, emotion barely visible on her small face. We are Yashida by blood. For the family's future, we'll give anything. If needed, even I will die, if it means Sister Mariko comes back safe. Rorschach retracted his sight and climbed into the cabin. Buggy walked up beside Shuexu, hesitated, and put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll make it right. Once Hydra is crushed in Japan, things will be different. Shuexu blinked, steadied herself, and led her quiet team into the Valkyrie. The heavy hatch sealed with a metallic click. Then, with a sudden, thunderous roar, the Vector engines spun up, and the transport tore into the sky. Whoever stood in the way, Hydra's base, Mrs. Viper, death was on its way. Author's note, thanks for the support. I only managed about 4,000 words today, and I haven't been resting well. Feeling a bit dizzy and short on inspiration. I'll focus on smaller engagements for a while. On a different note, there's talk of Ben Affleck's Batman reappearing in Aquaman 2 and Zack Snyder's universe getting a reboot. Personally, I prefer writing Marvel, but hey, writing's writing. 156. Ikitusen, Viper Poison. The compound sat isolated in a ring of mountains, its ancient stone buildings half swallowed by hanging vines and moss. From below came the thrum of twin rotors, growing louder until a helicopter loomed over the highest vaulted roof. Slowly, the central span split open and a steel landing platform slid into view. The helicopter touched down with a thud. The cargo hatch ripped open, and men in dark green, heavy armor spilled out, Hydra soldiers, rigid with discipline. They formed up on the metal deck, back straight, eyes fixed on the corridor beyond. A woman stepped forward from the shadowed interior. Her hair was a pale, yellow gold that fell to her waist. She wore a green dress beneath a long green coat draped from her shoulders. Her skin was pale as porcelain. Her expression was cool and distant. When she looked at the soldiers, her gaze felt like a strike. She lifted a slender hand, and the line snapped to attention. A chorus of voices saluted her with fierce devotion. Long live Hydra! Long live Lady Viper! The sound of loyalty softened the hard set of her mouth. She lifted her hand again. The soldiers turned and hurried down the stairs, vanishing into the bowels of the base to join the preparations already underway. Madam, this is the last squad we could pull back from the field, a bald man in gold-rimmed glasses said, his voice tight with agitation. He planted his hands on the railing and jabbed a finger in emphasis. Do you know what this costs us? How many favors and contacts we've blown? How much influence we've lost? Profits. Lady Viper cut him off. She turned with a speed that made the man start. Her eyes, the dark green of a snake's, bore into him. The skin at her temples was flushed, veins standing out against that immaculate pallor. Did you even hear what happened at Mount Fuji? She snapped. Our base was wiped out. No warning. Our forward spies routed, their feeds compromised. So you complain about profits? The aircraft earmarked for Baron Starrock are ruined. The mini-tank line is shot. Restarting it will be a nightmare, and the blueprints are probably already in someone else's hands, he stammered, clutching at the air like a drowning man. The Supreme Council they'll impeach you. They'll take your authority away. Supreme Council? She echoed, the amusement in her voice like a cold blade. A creature who hides in his chambers and feeds on human flesh and blood and dares call himself supreme. Is that the sort of leadership you trust? Does the Red Skull, Baron Stark's lifelong idol, humble himself for those hollow decrees? She paced toward him, loathing in every step. I have never been on the losing side against the Spear Bureau. I control Asia's economic lifelines. Why should I bow to some decrepit council, to any order from a so-called supreme? The bald man's sweat made his shirt damp under his jacket. He took another step back and found only the rail at his back. The ledge dropped away beyond it. His voice went thin. But Supreme shared alien tech with us, tech beyond anything on Earth. She laughed, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh yes, your gift from a foreign star. If the enemy comes, I'd like to see how that expensive toy performs. She closed the distance between them with a movement that was half dance, half threat. Her hips brushed his belly. Even through the layers of his uniform, he felt the contact like a brand. The man's face lost color, then flushed violently. He swallowed hard, his voice a cracked whisper. "Madam, please, I was wrong. Don't." Lady Viper reached up with one long-fingered hand and tilted his chin. Her nails gleamed. A seductive half-smile touched her lips. "Quiet," she said softly. "Kiss me." He obeyed like a man stunned. Their mouths met. One brief, pressured contact, and the change was immediate. The man's eyes bulged. A sudden nausea, a wave of panic and intoxication washed him. His skin darkened at the edges, mottling green and purple as a poison spread beneath the surface. He staggered back, hands clawing at his throat, and collapsed in a heavy heap on the metal deck. Lady Viper straightened, brushing her mouth with the tip of her finger, as if dusting off a dry smear. She watched the man's chest cease to rise and fall, then shrugged with elegant contempt. "What a waste," she said, voice like ice. "Cannot even accept a small mercy from me. Hydra's talent truly has fallen." A high, urgent alarm tore through the air. Red warning lights began to flash, painting the stone and metal in streaks of crimson. "Enemy intrusion! All stations, prepare for combat." Hydra soldiers snapped to action, just as the commander's voice said it. The compound filled with the clash of armor and the clatter of weapons. From every hallway, the soldiers shouted in unison, fierce and unyielding, "Hydra, long live." Off topic. Thank you for your support. Thank you G.E. Ghost Swordsman for the 500-point reward. This is a masterpiece, something I didn't expect when I first opened this book. Meltdown, meltdown, boom. The Valkyrie's engines roared as it touched down. Rorschach, bulked into his Terminator armor, disembarked with a thunderous thud. Magnetic boots sank into the wet ground, slick with green vegetation. He tilted his diamond-shaped helmet and through the visor fixed his gaze up at the cabin door. Boom, boom, boom. The Yoshida ninja squad spilled from the transport behind him, Yukio in black tights among them. Iron Man David, the pilot, sent a quick salutation into Rorschach's comm and then flexed the Valkyrie's wings, lifting off to another sector. Inside the cabin, Buggy stood at the open door, his mechanical arm raised in salute. In the surrounding ridges and tree line, more members of the Yoshida team waited for his orders. Click. Rorschach rotated his head, the voice that spoke over the channel deep and controlled. "We're still about 5 kilometers out from the tower. I'll draw their frontal fire. Buggy's team will slip in from the rear. The rest of you, operate freely. Focus on taking down as many Hydra soldiers as you can." "Yes, sir." Night wrapped the forest in shadow. Shuexu, her cheek half covered, lifted her chin without expression and signaled the Yoshida squad. The black-clad ninjas, loaded with weapons and ammo, melted into the trees like smoke, dispersing into the mountains. Shuexu bowed slightly to the metal giant before her, then sprang up into the canopy with strength that belied her small frame, vanishing into the dark. Rorschach retracted his optics and shifted the Terminator's gait into a run. He powered toward the castle tower and accelerated. Boom, boom, boom. The trunks shattered and rocks skittered as the armored colossus barreled through the tangled undergrowth, sending birds fleeing from their roosts. A few minutes later, through gaps in the canopy, a 100-meter-high fortress rose into view, ancient stone veined with green. Rorschach didn't slow. He unclipped the precision bomb launcher at his waist and cradled it as the distance fell below a kilometer. Kakaka, something whirred in the dark ahead. An automatic gun tower, staggeringly camouflaged with vegetation, unfolded on the path. Its rotating barrels spat a cone of lead and flame, blocking the only obvious approach. Rorschach didn't hesitate. He shouldered the grenade launcher and fired. The ordnance thundered, drowning out the gun tower's report. Night creatures scattered as the launcher's round found its mark. The camouflaged gun tower detonated in a spray of metal and fire, its automated sentinels consumed in the blast. He kept moving. The forest thinned as the terrain sloped toward the fort. Then, from the castle's outer wall, a heavy-caliber base defense turret flipped out and belched artillery. The sky lit with orange as shells screamed down. Rorschach's shield generator bloomed, a shimmering force field that took the hail of explosives. Before he could return fire, rockets streaked from the surrounding tree line, slamming into the keep and its turrets. Explosions rained debris. The force field took a pounding as fragments peppered it. A grin ghosted across Rorschach's face. Yoshida's ninjas were engaging the defenses. Just as he closed on the gate, the forest behind him shuddered. Mechanisms clacked, and the undergrowth parted as armored mini-tanks pushed through hidden panels and charged. Their barrels spun, locking onto Rorschach. Hydra foot soldiers in black advanced behind cover, loosing staccato bursts of energy fire. Ballistic rounds and energy beams stitched the night as they converged on him. The force field held, its hum syncopated with the power pack on Rorschach's back. Calmly, he brought the grenade launcher up and fired again. Then his other hand grabbed a multi-melta from its rack. Buzz, buzz. The weapon spat two concentrated, searing beams. Two mini-tanks liquefied instantly, their armor dripping in molten metal that ran like orange rivers. The soldiers clustered near the tanks had no time to move. Boiling metal splashed over them. Their screams were cut short as the molten iron swallowed them. Explosions from the remaining tanks rocked the clearing, blasting more of Hydra's attackers apart and leaving their formations in chaos. From the tree line, shadowy Yoshida ninjas slipped into the fray. Blades flashed silent and precise. Every swing left another Hydra soldier dead. When the last mini-tank erupted from Rorschach's second salvo, he glanced at the bodies scattered across the wood and the cost paid by Yoshida's warriors. He tightened his grip on his helmet, then turned for the gate. Buzz, buzz! He raised the multi-melta, aimed at the fortress's metal door, and fired. Two razor-bright beams lanced into the lock and seams. The heavy plate, designed to shrug off bombardment, gave like butter and pooled as boiling metal. Without hesitation, Rorschach slotted the multi-melta back and strode through the molten breach into the base. "Long live Lady Viper! Long live Hydra!" The cry rose around him as Hydra warriors in dark green heavy armor converged in the passageway. They hefted nozzle-equipped arms and unleashed tongues of flame. Puff, 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 the superheated jets licked toward the force field. The shield flared and absorbed the blast. Rorschach shrugged off a nearly empty bolt pistol that hung at his hip. He drew the super-phased sword stowed behind his power pack. Under the armor, servo muscles throbbed and contracted as the massive frame lunged forward. Ch-chi! The blade sang through air and flesh. He cleaved one heavy armored Hydra trooper in two. The body ignited instantly, flesh and vaporized armor guttering into flame. Others fell under the phased blade with the same horrific ease, their suits rupturing and feeding the blaze. Rorschach waded through the inferno, magnetic boots hissing sparks across the scorched floor, the giant sword carving a path into the heart of the base. The alarm screamed. Hydra soldiers poured into the corridor in a death charge, brandishing everything they had. None of it mattered. Rorschach's blade moved in a brutal rhythm. Each strike took a head, a torso, a life. The anti-air battery, meant to sweep hostile craft from the sky, was wrestled into the passage and turned like a last-ditch battering ram. Muzzles tracked and opened up. Bang, bang, bang. The artillery tore into the Terminator's shield and raked the armor, but it held. Rorschach's helmet flicked. HUD readouts pinned the gun's coordinates. He hauled the multi-melta free again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The concentrated beams ate through the anti-air emplacements. Molten metal sprayed in great arcs, and soldiers who'd been manning the guns were consumed with their guns in the torrent. After the last emplacement drooped and melted, Rorschach checked the multi-melta's remaining charge. He set it back on his rack as a backup and hefted his super-phased sword anew. Ahead, more Hydra troops fanned out in the tunnel, a living wall of green armor and fanatic shouts. Rorschach planted his feet, raised the sword, and advanced. "Come on, Hydra bastards! Let's kill them!" 158. Hydra's Titan? Viper Titan. Swish, swish, swish. The super-phased blade of the Terminator armor swept through a line of Hydra heavy infantry. Flesh and organs flew in a shower, the severed bodies scattered across the floor like petals. The towering suit, streaked with blood, trembled as 13 blood-soaked insignias clung to its thick plating. A metal hand sheathed in black casually closed around a Hydra soldier's helmeted skull. Crunch. The helmet collapsed inward, and a muffled scream died. Rorschach's diamond-shaped helmet turned. The eyepiece locked on the next target. For a heartbeat, the remaining Hydra troopers seemed to hesitate, then shouting, "Long live Hydra!" They turned tail and bolted down the corridor. Rorschach snorted. not bothering to waste ammunition on their retreat. He shouldered the oversized superphased sword, keyed the servos, and drove the Terminator suit after them. He wanted to see what tricks Hydra had left in their arsenal. A few minutes later, he broke into a cavernous inner testing bay. Rubbled mini-tanks and wrecked aircraft lay strewn across the pitted concrete. He paused, scanning the field with his eyepiece, and frowned at a mini-tank split neatly in two. He thumbed a fresh shell into the grenade launcher at his hip. "Tsk, armor again?" he muttered. "Looks like someone watched too many Tony Stark vids." A sultry female voice answered him from all directions, echoing off the walls. Rorschach didn't bother to look up. He held the grenade launcher and sword ready, unresponsive. "You bastard! No matter who you are, Hydra will be your eternal nightmare," the voice boomed. "You will pay dearly for your arrogance today." The bay shuddered. Concrete exploded outward in a geyser of dust and debris. Several hundred meters away, the surface ruptured, and a 30-meter, snake-like machine tore its way out of a subterranean hollow. It surged toward him in a writhing rampage. Rorschach's blue wolf eyes widened in the helmet's visor. The suit's electronic muscle bundles contracted. Heavy magnetic boots drove him into motion. He wasn't about to trade blows head-on with a 30-meter mechanical serpent, even in Terminator armor. He flipped into guerrilla mode and broke into a run. He fired the grenade launcher as he ran. The blasts tore at the dark green armor of the mechanical snake, chipping plates and spraying molten fragments, but they barely phased the machine's internal complexity. The creature's wounded tail, unarmored for a stretch, whipped through the air and slammed into the ground. The detonations kicked up a storm of rubble that rattled Rorschach's energy shield and stung the visors. A multi-barrel cannon unfolded from the serpent's maw and began pouring lead in his direction. The tracer storm chewed the air around him, turning the space into a blinding curtain of shrapnel. "Run! Run, you coward! See how long you can hide from my Viper Titan," the woman taunted. Rorschach fired the last rounds from his bolter, slung it aside, and grabbed the multi-tube plasma cutter mounted to his power pack. He braked hard. The magnetic soles spat sparks as they gouged the metal floor, and turned to face the advancing Viper Titan. He leveled the cutter at its massive head and opened fire. Two almost invisible, searing beams stabbed out, punching a molten crater in the snake's forehead. Molten metal spat and flowed. The machine's sensors and armor sagged under the heat. He fired again, cutting into the unarmored tail where it had been cracked open. The tail segment liquefied and collapsed. A shower of greenish smoke and burning metal hit the concrete. A heavy chunk of tail clattered to the ground. "Ah, my tail!" the voice shrieked. The serpent halted long enough to retract its machine gun and spool up an energy beam from deep inside its throat. Complex mechanical gears and coils began spinning, channeling a thick, coherent beam aimed straight at Rorschach. He didn't back down. He shoved the plasma cutter into its maw and opened up. The intense heat ripped through the exposed internals. Gears, coils, and articulated fibers melted into boiling pools of metal. The energy beam choked off as the machine's innards collapsed into molten ruin. The Viper Titan writhed as hot metal cascaded through its skull, drilling deeper into its ruined circuits. Globs of molten metal splattered against Rorschach's shield. The barrier held. He discarded the spent plasma cutter, activated the magnetic grips in his boots, and leapt. The boots stuck to the serpent's scorched armor. He climbed up and planted himself on its head. With both hands, he drove the superphased sword into the broken throat of the Viper Titan. The serpent convulsed and lunged forward, with Rorschach lodged in its mouth. The magnetic boots held him fast. He yanked the hilt and pushed with all the suit's force, ripping the monstrous blade through the machine's back toward the broken tail. The blade tore a rent across the armored body, scoring a line that ran in a terrible, sizzling arc. For a full 10 seconds, the Viper Titan charged, burning and screaming steel, until finally the drive gave out. The great machine collapsed to the ground, its flank ruptured by the superphased sword, its internal mechanisms shredded. It lay deflated and inert. Rorschach peered through his eyepiece into the cavity the blade had opened. Amid the tangled guts of servos and braided hydraulics, something human lay curled and strapped into the ruined chassis. A woman with long hair was suspended in a glistening, transparent gelatinous membrane. She convulsed, coughing blood. Adhesive mechanical tendrils clung to her limbs, wrapping and squeezing as if animated. He dismounted and walked across the warping metal toward her. "Mrs. Viper?" he asked softly into the helmet's calm. There was no answer from the woman's white eyes, and the seductive voice that had boomed moments before was gone. The situation told him enough. Core Hydra members went into combat personally. They expected to be targets. Rorschach raised the super-phased sword without hesitation and drove it down. The blade slipped through the gelatin and the woman's graceful body, and then she was still. He stepped back, the weapon dripping, and his voice came out flat through the helmet. "Mrs. Viper is dead. Most of the mission is complete." He gathered the spent multi-tube plasma unit from the wreckage, stowed it, and hefted the huge super-phased sword over his shoulder. The 13 blood-stained insignias on the suit's shoulder plates had scorched away into rust. Without haste, just the steady, inevitable stride of a man in a walking engine, Rorschach strode deeper into the base, following the trail of wreckage and the promise of more answers. 159. Hydra's brainwashing technology. Half an hour later, the Terminator armor, spattered with Hydra blood, pressed slowly into the deepest part of the base. Rorschach's visor caught sight of Bucky, who had been sneaking around for a long time. The Winter Soldier sat astride a silver metal giant, exhausted and bloodied, a chainsword in his mechanical hand. Around his feet lay cooling hellguns and pulse rifles emptied of ammunition. Within 10 meters, the floor was littered with the bodies of Yashida ninjas, limbs torn off, many mutilated. Even Bucky, the team's leader, looked like he'd been through something unimaginably brutal. "For the next mission, I should lend you the Lord Hunter armor. Bucky, you really have no luck," Rorschach said, shaking his diamond-shaped helmet as he eased the Terminator suit forward. "Captain, drop the sarcasm." Bucky cracked a pained grin and swallowed a mouthful of blood and saliva. He gestured weakly with one gloved hand toward the split-open silver giant beneath him. "If it weren't necessary to keep her alive, I would have chopped her to pieces with this chainsword." Rorschach removed his helmet and slid his super-phase blade back onto the pack. His cyan, wolfish eyes narrowed as they fixed on the woman revealed inside the torn metal hull. Where once had been a delicate young face, now there was a shaved head and swollen, bloody wounds, an obvious attempt to induce a coma. "Mariko Yashida?" Rorschach asked. "That's her," Bucky confirmed. He braced himself, still pale, and trained the chainsword toward Rorschach. His voice was low. "She's been brainwashed by Hydra. Seems Madame Viper intended to use her to control whatever remains of the Yashida clan. Where's Madame Viper? Don't let her get away." "Don't worry," Rorschach said dryly, a fang-showing grin splitting his face. "The disemboweled corpse can't escape." Bucky sagged as if the weight of relief would topple him. Rorschach's massive metal hand flashed out and caught the soldier's back, steadying him. Then, lifting his helmet by the rim, Rorschach spoke into his comms. "David, come and rescue them." "As you command, my lord," came the clipped reply. Outside that room, Yashida ninjas swept through their ancestral grounds, methodically hunting down any remaining Hydra soldiers. They gave no quarter. By the time they were done, any Hydra who hadn't fled faced certain death. Deep in the base, inside a secret lab, Mariko Yashida lay on a cold metal slab in only a thin layer of clothing. Iron Man David, part man, part machine, fitted a metal helmet studded with exposed cables onto her head while Rorschach watched, his cyan eyes fixed and unreadable. Bucky had already been taken by David to the Yashida medical team for treatment. Now the two of them had used the opportunity to examine whatever Hydra technology they could find. "This is Hydra's brainwashing apparatus?" Rorschach asked quietly, watching David adjust the helmet. "Don't worry," David replied, his metal head tilting as he scanned the device. "According to Hydra's records, her indoctrination is recent. The implanted memories are weak. They can be overwritten. Anything mentioning Madame Viper can be replaced with the Emperor. Even the Hydra organization can be rewritten as the Human Empire," David continued. "Of course, the exact outcome depends on the helmet's functioning." He pried open a panel, and his optical sockets glowed blue as he inspected the inner workings. "Frankly, it isn't just brainwashing. It's memory implantation. Once home, maybe Reditus can adapt this to restore the Empire's lost archive of knowledge." Rorschach shrugged, uncannily calm. Loyalty and combat skills can both be instilled. Simple brainwashing is risky. Surface obedience can crack under pressure. The most reliable method is to plant an unshakable belief in someone's heart. All systems ready, my lord, David said. He touched a control. The helmet hummed to life. Mariko convulsed with a raw, high-pitched scream, her body jerking like a fish out of water. In the frenzy, her thin clothing slipped and fell away. Neither David nor Rorschach spared a glance for her sudden exposure. Their faces were locked on the readouts, on the small indicators that would tell them whether the Hydra technology had taken. Later, after the process, Mariko, still weak and pale, was handed to her sister Yukio, who wept openly. The petite Yukio arranged for her sister's continued care, then fell to her knees before Rorschach. Rorschach's eyebrow lifted. He turned his head slightly to avoid her gratitude. "It was Bucky who saved Mariko," he said quietly. "If you meet him, you should thank him." Undeterred, Yukio bowed lower, her tears falling onto the cold floor. "You destroyed the Hydra base in Japan. You disemboweled the one who'd ruled our house for years. You saved my sister. All of this is the hope you brought us. I, Yukio Yashida, on behalf of the surviving Yashida, offer you our loyalty. No matter what you seek next, the Yashida family will be your personal guard," she promised. "We will be your loyal servants." Her forehead hit the ground hard. She kept kneeling, as if she dared not look up at the man before her. Rorschach's cyan eyes narrowed, and he ran his tongue along his fangs with a soft, almost amused sound. "Remember what I told you today, Yukio Yashida." He gestured sharply. "Stand up, don't kneel." He looked around at the others in the chamber. "From now on, no one kneels to me." $106. Bucky's request. Dark clouds rolled over Hiroshima. A fine mist drifted down, the first hesitant raindrops of a coming storm. On the outskirts of the city, inside an old Yashida family compound, recently reclaimed from Hydra, servants hurried about wiping blood from the stone courtyards and erasing the final traces of the battle. Footsteps thundered along the corridors. Dressed in a white kimono, Shueishu moved quickly through the wooden passageways and pushed open a makeshift ward covered in dust-proof plastic. In the center of the small room lay Mariko Yashida, her face bruised and swollen, but alive. She was propped up on pillows, eyes unfocused, staring at the thin hand raised in front of her. "Sister!" Shueishu's impassive mask cracked. She rushed to the bed and sank onto Mariko's lap, collapsing into tears like a child who had been wronged 1,000 times. The sound of her sobbing, or perhaps the return of memories, snapped Mariko's blank gaze back into focus. The stern will of the Yashida matriarch returned slowly to her face. "Shueishu, I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you these past days." Mariko's voice was weak but steady as she smoothed the short, soft hair at her sister's temple. "I'm home. The Yashida house will be safe. Tell me, how many did we lose to bring me back?" Shueishu, exhausted and hollow-eyed, lifted her face and began to tell everything, what had happened during Mariko's capture and the rescue that followed. As the details tumbled out, a storm of pain and rage built behind Mariko's eyes. Noticing her sister's condition worsening, Shueishu summoned the medics. After a quick examination, the doctor spoke quietly to Shueishu. "She suffered multiple severe brain injuries. Recovery will be long. Please, don't crowd her while she rests." Shueishu bowed her head and let the medical team administer what care they could. She apologized in a formal bow to the woman on the bed, then withdrew. For a moment, only Mariko lay there with her eyes closed. Her eyelids fluttered. A low, almost ritualistic murmur escaped her lips. "For the human empire, for the Emperor," she whispered. Bucky sat up slowly, wrapped in bandages. He flexed his metal arm on instinct. The servos inside gave a soft, familiar hum. He glanced down at the white wraps that covered him from shoulder to ankle and let out a dry laugh. "I've survived so many bullets and storms," he said to himself, "and now I've made up for it all." Barefoot, he stepped out into the courtyard. Rorschach was sitting across the way in a hulking armored suit, industrial, almost Terminator-like, lounging with an easy posture, a glass of wine in his hand as he watched the rain fall. When Bucky approached, Rorschach casually produced a bottle Bucky didn't recognize. "Green Taurus," Rorschach said without looking up. "Good for the wounded." Bucky opened the bottle with the thumb of his mechanical hand and tasted it. He frowned at the unfamiliar flavor. "It's strange. Unique." Rorschach flashed his blue, wolfish eyes and a grin that revealed slightly sharpened teeth. Not expired, or maybe these things don't have expiration dates, who knows? He sipped his own drink. Captain, when do we move out? Have you finished with everything in Japan? Bucky shook his head, took another sip, and watched Rorschach for a moment. Why does that local, Shuexu, keep showing up around you? Rorschach's eyes narrowed in mock offense. What, me? She comes by on purpose or by accident. It's not like I'm chasing her. He gave a theatrical look. Do I seem like that kind of man to you? I'm old-fashioned, give me blonde hair and, well, you get the idea. Bucky flushed and stammered. I didn't say anything. I didn't. Rorschach downed his glass in one gulp, then fixed Bucky with a lopsided smile. Don't be nervous. In my team, people are free, so long as they don't cross certain lines. I don't interfere in private affairs. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the weight of everything that had happened, but Bucky's emotions swelled. He drained the rest of the bottle, then laughed bitterly. I don't want to. I can't. A man like me, with blood on his hands, there's no future for me. Maybe I'll die in battle. That'll be it. I don't want to waste anyone else's feelings. Rorschach considered him for a moment. Your old friend Steve Rogers, he's still alive. I found that out after I recovered from Hydra's brainwashing. I had David help look. Can you believe it? Those two old soldiers from World War II are both still breathing. This world's a strange place. Bucky's smile was more sorrow than humor. We could end up on opposite sides. Rogers has the official backing. There may be fights, or worse. Rorschach watched the rain slide down the courtyard walls and spoke calmly. Bucky looked down, thinking it over, then let out a breath that fogged in the cool air. If we ever face Steve, promise me one thing, Bucky said quietly. Spare his life. Give me a chance to reach him. He's the last friend I've got in this ruined life. Rorschach blinked his blue eyes, then a small smile tugged at his lips. Okay? For a heartbeat, Rorschach's expression softened. He thought, almost to himself, Captain America? Why not make him the real captain of the Empire? But the thought was only that, a passing flicker in a head full of plans. 161. The unyielding will of the Necronter, Blood Scythe. After regaining control from Hydra, the Yashida family fell back into a dormant posture, but the tendrils of the clan were already slowly regathering lost strength. In the shadowy corners of Japan's corporate world, among relics of influence ordinary people never saw, the Yashida expansion quietly began again. Shuexu, acting head for the moment, and the remaining elders presented a samurai blade, the symbol of their blood oath, to Rorschach. He toyed with the sword as he and Iron Man David discussed their plan. Allow the Yashida family to rebuild itself, restore its old power. David would watch, guide, and give assistance as needed. David's report confirmed that Hydra's brainwashing technology had worked. Mariko, the true head of the family, had been returned to a normal state, no longer a puppet of Hydra, but an obedient, loyal human who believed in the Emperor and would die for the future of mankind. Rorschach approved. He was also curious to see what magical modifications Radidus might devise after absorbing the stolen technology. With the salvage secured, data disks and equipment samples taken from the Hydra base, Rorschach boarded the Valkyrie transport. The Vector engines roared as the ship climbed back into the sky. Buggy, embarrassed after being pressed into giving a small gift by Shuexu, kept his face red in the cockpit and avoided Rorschach's amused blue wolf gaze under the pretense of learning to fly a Valkyrie. Rorschach seized the moment to fire up a long-unused simulator and review the haul from the last salvage. Salvage countdown. Salvage harvest, Blood Scythe. Note, predecessor technology of the Necrons. A melee energy weapon forged from a bloodthirsty living alloy. It uses phase technology to pass through armor and employs unknown methods to tear vast amounts of blood from an enemy's body. It is the heroic emblem of the Necron warrior Urtup, who chose death over surrender to the Star God. Rorschach stared at the lone valuable entry, his blue eyes blinking once as if puzzled. Another Necron relic, useful, deadly, but inscrutable and impossible to replicate. He shut the simulator down, closed his eyes, and let the heavy frame of the Terminator armor go into rest mode. The Valkyrie's engines trembled the cabin, but they could not stir the tall figure within. Deep under the base, the great forge Rorschach had left burning had not cooled. Molten heat poured into the night as automatons moved blocks of plastic steel and quenched ceramic parts into newly excavated storage chambers. More than 50 servo robots rattled through the corridors, hauling material, clearing rubble, never complaining. A squad of vulture drones, gun-armed, hovering maintenance craft, patrolled the tunnels. From the base hall came the strains of rock music, faint but insistent. There, among coils of cable and stacks of raw material, the servo-skull Ratidus danced with a mechanical arm, assembling the first prototype of a modified Aokai guard. A vulture drone broke formation, its single lens eye swiveling. A metallic voice crackled through the airwaves. Raditus? David here. Raditus froze mid-hover, turning toward the drone. The Primarch is returning? How? How can he be back so soon? It's only been a week. Don't say I didn't warn you, David's voice replied dryly through the drone. If my lord knew you'd made hundreds of servo robots and built a prototype intelligent control force. You're dead meat, Raditus muttered, red light pulsing in his ocular. Abomination intelligence. I protest. I am making a significant contribution to the Primarch's conquest plan. You've had your fun, the drone said. Listen, the Primarch will return in 36 hours. You have 36 hours to clean up and restore the base. Ratidus's clamps twitched. I have given my strength to the Empire. I have shed blood for the Adeptus Mechanicus. I want to stand before the Primarch. I want to see the Emperor. Then don't ruin the Primarch's rare good mood, David replied. Seal up your toys, stash them in hidden vaults, and present them to our Lord at the right moment. Clean every trace of what he would deem an abomination. The servo skull let out what passed for a mechanical sigh. Fine. Thank you for the reminder. He hesitated, then snapped. All right. The drone's lens bobbed once. Message delivered. Restore the base. Raditus's anti-grav thrusters hummed as if in agreement. Then his voice amplified across the compound. The servo skull barked with an edge of panic and authority. All servo robots, halt current operations. The Primarch returns in 36 hours. Execute Operation Annihilation. Erase all evidence. At once, the base erupted in motion. Dozens of servo robots unfurled flexible tentacles and rolled up coils of plastic steel, sweeping scrap metal into tidy piles. Another wave of machines unfolded, tattered cloths soaked in cleaner and wiped every footprint from metal flooring. Ratidus flew over every inch of wall and ground, directing squads to move prototypes and illicit creations to deeper, sealed chambers. Hurry! Move faster! He ordered. Time is the currency of survival, Ratidus intoned, his voice echoing through the cavernous halls as cleaning crews worked feverishly to bury the sins of their makers.